and welcome today. I am absolutely delighted to have with me the doyen of staging. Hello, Elaine Penhaul of Lemon and Lime Interiors. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and very admiring of your pink wall there, Simon. I'm not sure it's going to help sell the house in the UK,
Oh,
but
look
I
at that!
can see that.
Look at that! Look at that burn already. I mean, people are going to laugh about this. The amount of I don't think you've got enough hours in the day to sort me out, have you? In terms of staging me correctly.
I'm not sure that I'm not sure hours of problem.
No, no. Look, Elaine, we've bumped into each other at far too many conferences than we would probably admit to. But I have been watching and obviously seeing Lemon and Lime and seeing what you do at for your clients. And I was desperate to get you guys on the platform and start talking about it. I think it's really, really important, the thought leadership. And as I always say these days now, that I always try to throw out a reason why people should stick through the interview here. We asked you for a stat that would make people, would jump out and get people's attention. And I think you came back to us and highlighted that, what is it? Pre-listed properties that switch agents and are professionally staged by Lemon and Lime sell for an average of 110% of their original guide price. No price change, just expert changing. I mean, that's pretty compelling stuff right there, isn't it?
We're really proud of that, and that's actually drawn from the 9-year data. We did a whole study with 20EA of the impact of staging, because, as you know, I'm a mathematician by background. We've collected data from day one of the business, and it's so important that people understand we're not an American fad. We're not just making houses look nice for the sake of making houses look nice. There is a very, very significant return on investment, and that's what's important about what we do.
Yeah, it's turning it from seeing, I don't know, this is often used in a really trite way, but it is turning it genuinely from being a cost to an investment, isn't it? That is, the data's showing that, as you said, with
the
our...
data shows it. Yeah, completely. We were really thrilled to do a long-term study, because we've always had, we've got case studies of pretty much any type of house that you get to mention. We've got water towers, we've got round houses, we've got cottages, we've got Georgian rectories coming out of our ears. We can case study all of those and show their success. But having a study that spans nearly the whole 10 years of the business, this data from 20EA as a comparison is just such a powerful piece of work. And that one stat where properties that have previously been listed have no change in guide price, and we stage that then go at 110% of their original guide is incredible.
It's amazing. And look, we'll come back to it, because I'm really keen to get your kind of your comparisons on the international scene, because obviously the home staging is quite mature, isn't it, in places like Australia and America, and I've been lucky enough to see it over there, so I'm quite keen to get there. But let's start at the beginning anyway, first of all, because I always like to get the origin story out of the way. Why did you decide to start the business? Give us the story behind the journey, as they say.
Well, it makes it sound like it was a decision. It wasn't a decision at all. I post-divorce, I was married to a developer for 20 years. Post-divorce, I ended up in 2008, 2009 with a chunk of mixed residential and commercial property and 4 small children to feed. I didn't know how to do any of that, couldn't sell the stuff for love nor money post-crash, and had to get my act together, basically, to make sure that my properties rented as well as they possibly could, and then eventually sold. And it seemed to me common sense to tidy up, to put new kitchens in, to paint carpets, to put a bit of paint around in my ex-rentals or in my rentals to get the best tenants. Started doing that.
Yep.
Then had a friend who moved to Budapest with her family. She had her property rented out for a while, brought it onto the market, and I happened to drive past. So they were living in Budapest. I happened to drive past and said, "Oh my God." I phoned her and said, "You cannot sell the house looking like that." It was winter of 2010, 2011. The market was still shocking, and it looked like an ex-tenanted property. And she told me, "Well, I can't come back. You'll have to go and see the count." So I went in with, my kids with their student friends. You know, we painted it, we put a little bit of furniture in, we did the garden, and it sold for 60,000 more than any agent was prepared to list it for at that point. And it was about a 450 value house. It wasn't super high end or anything. It was a family house in a village.
Yeah.
And at that point, the agents then started coming to me and saying, could you come and tell my client they can't possibly sell the house looking like that? I don't want to lose the instruction. And I'm going, well, I like houses, I like people, I'm very curious, you know, about these things. So yes, of course I can. And as a business coach, which is what I was actually doing at that point, then I had a million and one ways of saying, oh my goodness, you can't possibly sell the house looking like that. You know, we would talk about goals, we would talk about where people were going, what they were thinking, what they were noticing in the houses that they were looking for on Rightmove. And eventually they would talk themselves into, oh my goodness, I can't possibly sell it looking like this. Can you help me sort it out? And that was really how the business was born. Got to about 2015 and my accountant phoned and he said, Elaine, you've got to stop it. What do you mean I've got to stop it? So I'm still running the business under my investment business, under the property business that I had. And of course, they're taxed differently as a trading business and an investment business. So my accountant phoned me and said, you've got to stop. Or you've got to set it up as a proper business and, you know, and do it on purpose. So I had to take a huge space at that point. And at that point, we still called what we were doing. And I say I've got a couple of friends who used to come and help me. And somebody doing a bit of admin because I am useless at admin. I just don't have any
all the best are useless at admin.
Yeah. So I needed somebody to pick up those bits. So we then decided to set up the business on purpose, which was a huge leap of faith. We were calling it professional property presentation, what we were doing at that point, because the term home staging, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what the Americans were doing until I then started digging into it once I'd set up the business on purpose. And even now, we only use it really because that's the term that Google uses for search, because I still think that it conflates what we actually do with almost an American version, and what we do is different in its kind of origin, and because of the way that we sell properties in the UK, it's different. So 2015, we got to the point where I had to set it up on purpose, and as they say, the rest is history. Here we are.
I mean, that's really, it's always fascinating to learn, obviously, how it happens, and obviously to hear you. I had a 20-year plan that was very clearly, obviously, you knew what you wanted to do. That's always the way, isn't it?
Lovely to have a 20-year plan, or even the 20-month plan.
So what have been the highlights and sort of low points of that property staging then? What have you learned over that period, and what have you taken?
Oh gosh, I have learned a huge amount. I think the things that I have brought with me really that have given us the USP, and I've learned to use them as strengths, where to start with, they were almost things that marked me out as perhaps not knowing what I was doing. For a start, many property stages across the world come from an interior design background.
Yeah.
Or any kind of design background. I have no design background. I have a very good accidental eye in 3 dimensions. In other words, I got chucked out of art at school because I was so useless. They told me not to bother. And I realised once I was developing or renovating the first property that I did with my now ex-husband, which was a 15th century beamed cottage that had historically had a thatched roof. It was a Leicestershire longhouse. And we took it down, right down to the beams. And I realised at that point that I can see in 3 dimensions. And then suddenly it's like, oh. And learning that was huge for me, and could bring that ability along with my real either or real curiosity about the data and collecting data obsessively about every single aspect of what we did at property sales and so on. And then just being able to talk to anybody. You know, I'd learned mostly through my sailing career that the only thing in life, and you'll know this as well, the only thing in life you really need is an ability to talk to anybody about anything. And if you can do that sitting in somebody's kitchen, great. So they were my kind of high points, I guess, is in bringing all of that with me and going, oh, I can do this. I think low points in a staging business, in any of the stages, will tell you this, is just being constantly scared. You're constantly scared of what the market's going to do next that you have no control over. You're constantly scared that the busier you get and the more popular your service or your business becomes, that you've got to capitalise new furniture, you've got to bring in more people, because what we do is very resource heavy. And learning to live with being scared all the time has been a journey in itself, I think.
Okay. Yeah, you don't. I suppose you know, especially the market turning. That would always be the. You can imagine. And is it true to? I mean, do the best agents still stick with home staging when it gets sticky, or do they? Is that perversely? Is that the time when actually you need things like home staging?
I think what we've learned is that we are a very staging per se is a very market resilient business, and I've only learned that having been in business for now 10 years. So if we take the post-referendum market, the 2016 market, where things were sticking, it was very slow. There was an obvious need for staging, as there has been since, in as much as when things are a little bit slow, there are buyers have got choice, essentially. There are properties coming onto the market, and buyers are perhaps a little bit slow to be making decisions. Staging is really important to get the speed of sale there. It makes the one property in that area stand out, and buyers will go to that one first. What we were then afraid of as COVID hit was that bit where we came out of COVID, May 2020. Even the agents that have used us a lot were saying, well, now we don't need you because properties are flying off the shelf. We're absolutely fine without staging. It's not relevant to us anymore. Fortunately, there were a few agents who did stick with us. And what they found very quickly in that hot market was that instead of having 3 or 4 buyers per property, they were going up to 10 or 12 buyers per property. And so, of course, what that then did was to drive prices crazy high above listing. We've got lots of examples of things going at 15, 20% over listing within a few days, because we were driving a much bigger competitive market at that point. So sometimes it's about speed, sometimes it's about price, but staging has proved itself to be relevant in both markets in a big way.
Look, you're going to be biased, but as you were talking about this, can you think of one single other thing that has the ability to affect the price like that, the fee that you actually achieve? I can't think of too many other ingredients you can throw into the mix, apart from a great agent, of course. But it does strike me that actually as you said, with the metrics you're getting from 28 and everything else now, that it's singularly probably one of the most important things you can do, really, if you're hoping to get that top end fee.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the second book, the second book I wrote called How to Sell Your House, that was published last year, I talk about 3 things. One about getting the price right, one about getting the promotion of the property right. Now, those 2 things are about having a great agent. And a great agent can then become, well, it's the good to great thing, isn't it? It's going from being a good agent who gets the price right, who gets the promotion right, to being a great agent who then brings in the added value of making the house look the best it possibly can. And of course, for the agents that we work with, there's no cost to them, absolutely no cost to them. They don't have to do anything except ask a client to say, may we pass on your details? We always give the first consultation free of charge anyway, whether that's in person or whether it's a video consultation with a client. So we will always give away a huge amount of advice that either the agent or the seller can act on, there's absolutely no losing. For Kerfuffle, people on the Kerfuffle platform, the agents there will do a referral fee as well, so they're actually making money from from getting the staging happening, and then they're making money again by having that property sell higher and more quickly.
Yeah.
It really is a no-brainer.
It's a win-win, isn't it, Elaine? Ultimately, I mean, it's a fantastic option when you look at it. And talk to us about some of the kind of standout successes that you've had over the years.
We actually, a couple of weeks ago, had a client come back to us who we had done a stage property for towards the end of 2020. The property that they had on the market, which was down in the Cotswolds, had been on the market for 4 years.
Yeah.
And it was empty. It was a beautiful Cotswold property. It had a big renovation on it, and was completely empty. And when we first went in, it felt very cold. One of those houses hasn't been lived in. Nobody's really loved it for a long time. And we staged for that client. And we actually, the person who subsequently bought the house arrived on the drive as my vans were pulling off the drive. So literally, the agent had persuaded a couple that had seen the property previously, 18 months before, dismissed it, they didn't like it, to come back and have a look once the furniture was in place. They fell in love with it, bought the property pretty much there and then at the original asking price. And we then went on and did some interior design. The client phoned up, said, fantastic, you've done a great job there. Could you please do the same for another house I've got up the road? We went up there, going, oh my goodness, we can't possibly repeat that level of success. And of course it did. That was gone. That was back end of 2020, early 2021. Same client phoned me up, and he had been doing the development on those. This now is his personal house, and we're in the process of staging his personal house. So we've got lots of stories where we've had great success, and then suddenly somebody will kind of phone us. I've had 2 other calls this week from past clients because they know it works. And often now it's the client, the seller, the home seller themselves that's phoning us because they saw the success in the first place, and whether or not their new agent recommends it, they'll phone us themselves because they know it works.
I mean, that's the definition of word of mouth, isn't it? Which is obviously what it's the most powerful marketing you can possibly get. And so, look, it can't all be obviously all sweetness and light. So, give us an idea about the other side, kind of like the crash and burn stories. What were and crucially, what were the lessons learned that obviously the ones that didn't go right?
Crash and burn moments tend to be getting to site and finding that actually you haven't got half the furniture or a crucial piece of furniture that you were supposed to have. So we had a lovely story where we got to site and one of my team, I wasn't there because I've always really had a team that put things in place. Very early days I used to go, but then the team I've kind of grown the team around me. And one of my team phoned up and said, Elaine, do you know where the sofas are? Okay. Because sofas are fairly critical. There are small things that you can get around, but
that's one you can't blag.
That was that was absolutely, you can't blag that one. We had one much more recently where, for various reasons, the furniture that was going to a property was in one warehouse and the accessories were being delivered from somewhere else because they'd come back from a property and were going to another property separately. And the furniture arrived at the house, but the accessories didn't. So those tend to be our, nightmare moments, really.
And how do you mitigate that? Is that just that's just experience, and you have to kind of pick that up as you go along, do you?
Yeah, I mean, we now have a much more robust system. So all our inventory is cloud-based. We send pick lists to the transport team. We have check all the way through. And most of those scenarios are less likely to happen than they were, for sure. But if you're doing a property that's, an average property for us is 4,500 square foot.
Yeah.
And so, you've got a lot of rooms. You might have, with all the accessories and so on, you've got more than 1,000, maybe 1,500 individual pieces. So, you've got pillows, you've got the bedding, which is a duvet, which is a bedspread, you've then got the cushions, you've got the throws, very quickly wraps up to a lot of individual pieces. And human error is human error. It doesn't matter how good your systems are, how good your lists are. If something gets forgotten, it gets forgotten, and it is an absolute pain. And because we work nationally, if it's property that's close by, we can go and sort it out. If it's a property that's in, as we're based in the Midlands, but if it's property that's down in Devon, for example, then what do we do? Do we buy something locally? Do we basically borrow something locally? I've got a lot of good connections, as you know, so sometimes we have to do that. Or do we actually travel back? And that depends what it is. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. Okay.
And we try not to blame anybody in the team. I've done it as much as any of my team have done it, but it is frustrating.
And I mean, your background, as you said, you've got unlike my good self, who can barely add up, you've got a strong mathematics background and everything else. So I shouldn't be surprised that obviously you do take advantage of that kind of the data side of things. So what is the impact of that long-term data? What difference will it make on the business if you're trying to obviously, leverage credibility to out there? How do you use it?
I think there are two things. One is about leveraging credibility, and one is about adding profit to your bottom line. And the data that we have got, so the full study that we did with 20EA says that our stage properties are 5 times more likely to be sold at asking price. Now, on average, properties sell, I think the long-term stuff says 96.8% of asking. And the unstaged properties are 7 times more likely to go under asking than ours.
Wow.
And we're also 18%, and this is over the 9 years of study, 18% more likely to go over asking. Now, when we did kind of some very, very basic number crunching on that, it means if you're an estate agent who is selling somewhere around 25 to 40 million pounds worth of property a year, which is, would be normal in our world, then the difference on the bottom line is by doing absolutely nothing else except making those phone calls, no referral fees, no dramatic over asking, nothing, is a £10,000 uplift on that, and that's pure profit. If you're running £100 million office, then you're going up into 100,000 or even more than that, depending on what your percentage fee is. Because we know also that many of the agents that we're working for are, instead of charging 1%, 1.25, an average fee, many of them, because they're bringing in such a good added value and getting those sales very quickly at asking or above, they're able then to edge their fees up so that they're then starting to charge 2.5%. So it's that net profit, and everybody likes that. That's the bit that makes the difference at the end of your financial year, isn't it?
Of course, the margin gives you opportunities, doesn't it? And I mean, I think every good agent we're dealing with, I mean, it's always been the way they're trying to figure out how you can get a better fee. But I think this is a classic example of how it needs to be in your kit bag for figuring that out for the year ahead. So that's invaluable. And Elaine, how do you see like the future of property staging? And look, even though this isn't a pure tech discussion we're having here, I don't think I'm allowed to have a webinar without mentioning AI, and things like virtual staging. How do you see the whole future angle of it, and what the pitfalls do you think?
So that's quite a big question for us at the moment because, as I may have said to you when we last met, we're now in the process of upscaling Real Franchise. We are franchising this year,
Yeah.
so we have got much better local reach around the country. So to go to that first, and then I'll come back to the tech bit if I may, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So the way that staging works, and you mentioned earlier about the American market and the Australian market. In those markets where staging is much more normal and is, particularly in the US, is a much more mature market, the Australian market has grown extremely rapidly, facilitated in a big part by the way they sell houses over there. We are slightly hampered by the way that houses are sold over here because they don't go under offer at an early stage, as you know, and or when they go under offer, sorry, they don't go under contract at an early stage, which means that people are scared of the kind of indefinite nature potentially of staging and a fall through. The way the Americans and the Australians trade property is much more conducive to staging.
Yeah.
Things going under offer, so the staging can be pulled out and moved on more quickly, which helps build the business, and it also helps the estate agent and the seller accept the costs involved with staging. So as the property marketing changes in the UK, and of course it will ultimately, we already have a very big reach nationally. I think the market will become more hyperlocal, if you like, around staging, and we will go to the model almost where an estate agent or a stager works just for 2 or 3 agents, but stages pretty much everything they bring onto the market.
Okay.
So a stager, instead of having to work right the way across the country, is just working in a hyperlocal market with a few agents. They understand what one another does. They work really well, really clearly together, and that allows them that market to grow. And we're trying to get the front end of that with franchising this year. We know it's possible. We know what our market looks like, and being able to deliver the service that we can, that we're already delivering, but more cost effectively because we can warehouse furniture more locally. We've got more people resourced locally. Will help us to do that in a big way. In terms of virtual staging, I'm a big fan, as you know, in certain circumstances. Where people say, oh, well, we're going to do it virtually because it's cheaper, then I would say, no, it's a false economy. Because if you're staging something that is, a fully built family home,
yep,
and it's empty, when people walk into that house, in order to put money, in order to put the maximum offer on the table, they need to fall in love.
yep.
And like anything, you're falling in love visually, you're falling in love, because you get that connection the minute you walk into the house. And that really is about showcasing the lifestyle with the furniture, with the accessories, with the artwork. So where something's built like that, I think real life staging, I think virtual staging is a false economy. But we use virtual staging a lot. So we'll use it with the developers who are trying to generate interest off plan. Now, whether or not they're wanting to sell off plan, if it's building them a waiting list by having virtual staging, and then we can create almost the virtual staging in real life for the first show home. And we've already got a wait list because people know what it's going to look like. They walk in, and then you've got that competitive market game. There are 2 other instances when we use it. One is where a property needs renovation. Now, that might be in one room, it might be in lots of rooms, and we can essentially virtually clear out everything that's there and renovate it. So I did one, for example, that was going from commercial to residential, and we created it was horrible as a commercial, but the investor didn't want to spend the full cost of actually converting it to resi. But we did that virtually, which sold that house. And sometimes a room in a house has the wrong function or has multiple functions. So we can virtually stage one room and then give alternative uses of that room through virtual staging. So we've done the real staging as a games room, for example, but it could equally be an annex. It could be split, be an annex with a little kitchen and a little sitting room, or it might be a home office, for example. And so we'll use the virtual to create different functionality of spaces that aren't immediately obvious to a buyer.
That's really, really interesting, that is. And just in terms of those virtual trends, you know, how do you think that is going to influence the market for the physical staging things? Is it going to become hybrid? Is it going to impact on it? Or how do you see that developing?
I think there's an education piece. There really is an education piece because people, agents particularly, and then they are, of course, the educators of their sellers,
Yeah.
see virtual staging as a cheap option instead of doing real staging. And that, of course, then impacts because, you know, we have clients who come back and say, oh gosh, it's so expensive. You know, that's several thousand. If I do virtual staging, then it's only going to cost me a couple £100.
Yeah.
And we go, okay, well, off you go. And we have a lot of people who then come back to us and say, well, people get there and then they're really disappointed. Could you stage it properly now? So I think there's an education piece about and I don't think it should be an either or. I think both options should be available, and then the education is found where one is more effective than the other. And we are very powerfully giving that message. I saw one of the US educators last week was putting out a blog to say virtual staging is rubbish and everybody should do real staging. Well, that's just really unhelpful because they're both great used in the right way.
Yeah. But look, honestly, it's been fascinating. I knew it was going to be obviously amazing listening to you. I mean, I think there's a number of things that jump out at me. I think, you know, the no risk element of it, obviously for the agent side of things, being the expert in your field, being able to just get somebody to have a chat with you about it and potentially earn revenue is fantastic. I love use of data. I think that's really, really clever. And of course, it, you know, can only make the agents feel better. And of course, ultimately, that's what the vendors coming to you for, isn't it? Is to be able to do that. Your history and your honestness, I think, comes across as well, which is really, really refreshing, obviously, from here. I'm going to encourage everybody to go to the Lemon and Lime page on the Kerfuffle website. There is Elaine Fantastic and the team there doing a special deal for us as well. And I'm going to just say for now, Elaine, thank you so much for taking the time out to educate us today on staging.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to see you, as always.
Cheers, Elaine. See you soon. Bye-bye. Cheers.